Welcome back to the show. This is Mike Kegley with Larry Smith and Brad Sturdy. We also have producer Tony Cordero joining us. We are very, very lucky to have Gloria Nevarez, who is the commissioner of the Mountain West Conference, joining us to talk a little bit about all the change that is going on in college athletics right now. I'll tell you, Commish, did you ever think that it would have been this crazy when you stepped into this role in terms of what the landscape looked like when you began to where it's at right now?
No way, no way could I have predicted all of this. In fact, I mean, global pandemics, house settlements, I mean, things that were so outside my realm of comprehension. I like change. I consider myself a change agent, but recently this has been pushing my outer boundary of comfort.
When you think about everything that's happened in the last 2 or 3 years, especially with the Pac-12 becoming basically now a two-team league, if they can even continue on as that, where does that leave the Mountain West in terms of being the West Coast entity for college athletics right now?
That's something we spend a lot of time talking about, is positioning our league for the future. I mean, we're one of the more younger leagues. We're only 25 years old. The Pac-12 was 108. So very excited about our trajectory over a short period of time, but also how do we best position for opportunity going forward, and being that the FBS league in the Western region certainly is part of that plan.
Do you look at what's going on, like with the situation with Florida State and Clemson? Do you ever role play, like, what would I do if this was going on in our conference, or how would I handle that? Because I don't even know, some of these situations are so unique. How do you role play something that's never happened before?
Exactly. I mean, everything we're facing is like a case of first impression these days. And so we actually engaged um, a practitioner named Brian David Johnson, BDJ. He's a futurist threat caster in internationally known big business, Fortune 500 topics, and had a great relationship with the president at Utah State. And so he came, and a fan of the Mountain West. So
Yes.
he came and was very excited to help us think about all the myriad of crazy futures, narrowing those that are maybe most likely and most dire, and then helping us think about what are those industry or market flags or factors that say, hey, this outcome is a little bit more likely than some of the others. Let's start looking at it now. So two things. One, we're thinking about all the possible outcomes, and two, they're not gonna, hopefully we'll have thought through ways to address them and have already kind of digested them, so we're not caught flat-footed or, you know, delayed by shock and acceptance.
When you look at the Mountain West Conference and the two teams still left over from the Pac-12, is there still a chance that they could become members with the Mountain West Conference? Would that strengthen the conference? Does that put you in a better position to move forward if you can get those two into your conference being?
Well, kind of back to your last question, thinking forward about all the different scenarios that are out of our control, but also focusing on what we can control now in the present. And as you know, we have a 1-year football scheduling agreement with both schools, and we're in the process of talking about year two, mutual interest in trying to get that done. And honestly, it changes day by day. I know that Washington State and Oregon State are trying to run out every ground ball they can and figure out what their future holds. And there's a lot of TBD. You mentioned the lawsuit at the ACC and how that might have a ripple effect. And so really for us right now, we're really just focused on what makes the Mountain West stronger. And if and when we get an opportunity to talk about expansion or anything else, we will analyze it at that time under those circumstances. As you can imagine, I've gotten that question a ton, and it's just I don't know what the future holds, but we are open and ready to talk about anything that makes us stronger.
How do you approach the new media landscape where we have the television over air broadcasters, the balancing that with the streaming rights, and then the way the big conferences, the big two, have tried to take every TV window on Saturday and even maybe Friday night. How do you figure all that in when you're trying to figure out how to get your product out there for your fans?
Well, it certainly is exactly the Rubik's Cube and the puzzle that you just outlined. We have a free to public digital network called the Mountain West Network that's been out there and has really great production quality. Our current media agreements end at the end of June in 26, so we'll be in the market in 25, which on the one hand, very thankful we weren't in the market in the past couple of years because it was a down cycle as we saw, but also very optimistic because we just brought on a third linear partner in TNT and True Sports, which is super exciting and very rare to find another linear partner while you're midterm in your current agreement. So that was really, really great news for us. And those games will be streaming on Max, which will be an amazing beta test for us and them in bringing college sports to that, college football specifically, to that platform. So we're really excited. I think we're well positioned. And then, one of the assets in our region is that Western time zone, which actually helps us open up windows, be competitive in those windows. Certainly for our cold weather schools, those late kicks aren't received well, but it is a significant piece of our value in the Western region.
When you look at where college football is headed, we've got the new playoff starts this year. How does that affect the bowl games going forward in your mind? And are we going to be able to continue to see bowl games in the future? Or it's almost to me like there's the potential out there for the bowl games to become kind of what the NCAA basketball tournament has done to the NIT. It's still there, it's still around, but it really doesn't draw the popularity it once did. The schools going are interested, but the outside fan interest just doesn't seem to be there anymore. Are you fearful of something like that happening with the bowl games?
The bowl environment is something that we've all been looking at. How does this expanded CFP impact the bowl environment, period? Like, what's going to happen? We have 2 years left on the current agreement, so you won't see much in the way of change, I think, in the next 2 years. But what's unique about the bowl environment is it's in a window that is traditionally when people come home for the holidays and watch college football. And that's why it has remained a very robust space, because the viewership numbers are still incredibly high. It's still a great opportunity for our student athletes to put a bow on their season, to think about recruiting, and especially within transfer portals, showcasing your institution again, providing that postseason experience. So while I don't know what the future holds and what it really looks like, I do think the bowl space remains very robust and viable. Might look different, might say different, but the number of teams available to populate those bowls really hasn't contracted. You only got a couple that are actually additionally going up into the CFP playoff, and many of us are short when it comes to having the number of bowls and teams to place. So I feel like the inventory is still there. The desire to watch football during that time, i.e. host bowls, is still there. Whether those become like mini tournaments or several of them glom together to make an event, I don't know, but I think the environment will still stay strong.
On the other hand, with basketball, you see the NCAA tournament going to expand. Is that going to help the smaller conferences, or do you think that is just a way for the Power Two and maybe the Big 12 to say, well, now we need our 11th place team to be in the tournament? How do you see that playing out?
So I was actually on the subcommittee as part of the transformation committee that looked at championships. And the number that came out was 20%, that 20% of the sponsoring field should be if two conditions. One, you want the best team in the country to be represented, best teams to have a chance for the title. And two, you're going to honor AQs. So then you look at the sports sponsorship side, say 20% of that. And then the world looked at men's and women's basketball like, oh, what is 20%? Does that mean for March Madness? And we said in that subcommittee, we're not really looking at March Madness. Certainly it would warrant an exploration or some research, but that wasn't the intent. So I'm of the position that it's a really nice tournament the way it is. I don't know that we've seen someone make a run from the bottom of the field all the way to vie for the national title. So indicates to me that we probably have the right field size. So if we could expand, I would be in favor of it. If it didn't harm the current construct of the tournament, more opportunity, the better. And then, still with retaining the desired 31 automatic qualifications in the field. I think that's important. So then, long story short, sure, I'd favor expansion if it didn't totally upend the current structure of the tournament, didn't put pressure or negatively impact our conference tournaments and league play. And I think that's what they're noodling on right now, is maybe a modest expansion in the first round.
And I'm going to give you Tony's version of how I think would be best for the smaller conferences and the bigger conferences. And I want to get your ideas on what you think is. I've been noodling on this for about 18 months now, and I think I've come up with a plan. The Tony plan would be to let the CFP do their thing. Let them have their down and play into their champion. The remaining conferences, instead of bowls, have another tournament. And you play in that space, at that Christmas time space, down into your champion. And then the night before the two conference championship games in the NFL, on the Saturday before, in that evening where there's nothing happening, the ultimate tournament champion of college football is decided. The best of the little folks against the best of the big boys. What would your answer be to the Mountain West to a proposal of something like that?
Well, I would take issue to the division, and I know there is a division between the Power Four and us in spending, in size, in scope. But I would not want to see that division in competitiveness, because we have shown we have teams that can get up into that top 10. And so to be put in a separate class, right now, the current college football playoff is 12 teams, 5 get AQs. Those 5 are the top champions, regardless of brand affiliation. And I think that, to me, is the most equitable way to get to the best teams in the country. The rest are chosen at large, those 7 other spots. And I think, and I believe, and it's our intent as a league to position ourselves to compete for that as well. So I wouldn't be in favor of anything that separates us out in a different track prior.
Fair enough.
And we want to say that's Tony's idea. But the other thing that's interesting is this endless appetite for additional revenue, is that ever going to end? Are we going to look back and say, well, that was the 2020s, that's when everybody had to have more revenue? Or is that just going to be the future, where pretty soon a conference commissioner like yourself will be wearing a jersey with sponsors all over you? Will it end?
Everybody knows who we are, or cares what we're wearing, but I get where you're going with that. But I've put a lot of maybe just philosophical thinking into this, and I think college athletics is unique as far as the business space, because we're tied to the higher education, we're tied to the academy, and we don't make business decisions in a vacuum and a bubble, because we have this greater mission that has to do with educating young people, staying true to the academy, getting degrees, equity, all the things. But we are, and we can't deny, in the greater ecosystem that is our country and what we're going through right now. And we are a capitalistic, democratic society, and that is how we were built. That is the economy that we live in. So how do we match the two? I've been at big schools. I've worked at Oklahoma. I've worked in the Pac-12. I get, no matter what level you're at, there's need for more. It's never enough. And even if you're being fiscally responsible, there's this upward pressure that I think just quantifies what it means to be in America. And so, having been behind that curve a little bit, having restricted ourselves in a sense to level the playing field, we're now feeling that pressure. The lid's been popped off a little bit. We're, letting the air out of the bubble to some degree, and need to adjust with those times.
So basically then it's a little bit like David Lee Roth once said, if two's good, four's better.
Again, at our basketball conversation, more isn't necessarily always better, but how can we stay true to who we are, educating young people through sport, being competitive, but yet adjust with the times. I think our own NCAA process failed in that, and we're all members of that. It's not pointing at the staff. We just could never pass bylaws that would encompass new technology and social media and influencers and be able to monetize. So now we've got to double up to catch up in a sense. So it feels like, whereas I'm hopeful under new President Charlie Baker, we'll be able to see those trends and really adjust how we do business as technology evolves, as issues evolve, rather than this is who we are, this is what we are, and then we stay true, and then all of a sudden that's irrelevant or outdated.
Well, Commissioner Nevarez, we want to thank you so much for joining us. This has been a great conversation. Have a wonderful season this year: football, basketball, all the other sports, volleyball, soccer, everything that you've got to get a handle on. I'm sure this is probably a little bit of the calm before the storm, before things get going. We're going to take a quick break. Commissioner Nevarez, thank you again so much for joining us today. And we will be right back with the show right after this.